What happens when a single cruel comment in a five-star restaurant echoes into the sterile silence of a billion-dollar boardroom? We've all felt the sting of being misjudged, of being made to feel small by someone who holds all the cards. But this isn't just a story about an insult. It's a story about the moment the tables don't just turn, they flip with the force of a hurricane. It's about the shattering collision of assumption and reality, where the person you dismiss today might just hold your entire future in their hands tomorrow. This is the story of Mirabel Kowalski, a waitress whose accent was mocked, and the day the man whose girlfriend mocked her had to beg for her approval. The ambient hum of Ethelgard was a carefully orchestrated symphony of quiet wealth. It was the sound of heavy silver cutlery kissing porcelain, the gentle slosh of a $2,000 Bordeaux being poured into a crystal glass, and the murmur of conversations that could shift stock prices or dissolve marriages. For the patrons, it was an escape. For Mirabel Kowalski, it was the front line. At 26, Mirabel moved through this world with a grace that belied the ache in her feet and the weight of her reality. She wore the restaurant's uniform, a tailored black dress, simple but elegant, like a suit of armor. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun, and her focus was absolute. She could anticipate a diner's need for more water from across the room, describe the notes of a pouilly fuissé, with unfeigned expertise, and balance 3 sizzling plates on one arm, without a tremor. She was, by all accounts, an exemplary waitress. But there was one thing she couldn't hide. One part of her that didn't fit the polished aesthetic of Ethelgard, her accent. It was thick, unapologetically Polish, a melody of rolling R's and softened vowels that was a legacy of her childhood in Gdansk. She had arrived in New York with her parents at 16, full of dreams that the city had a way of grinding into dust. Her father's construction business had collapsed after a bad partnership, and a subsequent stroke had left him needing constant care. Her mother, a proud woman who once taught literature, now worked cleaning houses to make ends meet. Mirabel, meanwhile, was a ghost in her own life. By day, she was a final-year student at NYU, pursuing a double major in business administration and computer science on a patchwork of scholarships and loans. Her professors saw a quiet, intensely brilliant student who rarely spoke but consistently topped every exam. By night, she worked at Ethelgard, the punishingly long shifts and generous tips, the only thing keeping her family afloat and paying for her father's mounting medical bills. Her real life, the one that burned inside her, happened in the stolen hours between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Hunched over her laptop in their cramped Queen's apartment, the rhythmic click of her keyboard, a secret language of ambition. Tonight was a Tuesday, typically a slower evening, but Table 7 was an island of noise and entitlement in the calm sea of the dining room. It was the domain of Richard Davenport. Even people who didn't follow the tech world knew the name. Davenport Innovations had revolutionized data security with its Aegis protocol, making Richard a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp jaw, thoughtful brown eyes, and an easy confidence that came from never having heard the word no. He was a regular, and usually a pleasant one. Distracted always on his phone, but polite. The problem wasn't Richard. The problem was his companion, Tiffany Hayes. Tiffany was a creature of Instagram, a meticulously curated collection of angles and filters. Her fame was built on showcasing a life of effortless luxury, a life entirely funded by Richard. Tonight she was holding court with two other women who were carbon copies of herself, all sharp, contouring lip filler, and the vacant, predatory boredom of those who have everything and value nothing. And then he had the audacity to say the lighting was unflattering for the photo Tiffany was saying, her voice a shrill instrument of complaint. I was like, "Babe, it's a helicopter. The lighting is what it is." Her friends laughed, a sound like tiny, sharp bells. Richard offered a faint, distracted smile, his thumb scrolling endlessly on his phone. Mirabelle approached the table with the water pitcher. "More water, sir, ma'am?" she asked, her voice low and professional. Tiffany didn't look at her. She just waved a dismissive hand, a Cartier bracelet jangling on her wrist. "We're ready to order." Finally. Mirabelle stood patiently, pen and notepad in hand. She had learned long ago not to let the casual cruelty of her customers pierce her armor. She was a professional. This was a transaction. The friends ordered quickly salads, appetizers, a flurry of modifications. Then it was Tiffany's turn. She scanned the wine list, her brow furrowed in concentration, as if she were deciphering ancient scripture. "We'll start with a bottle of the Sauve." She stumbled, her perfectly manicured finger tapping the menu. "The Sauvignon Blanc." She pronounced it with a hard, flat G and an anglicized blank. "An excellent choice, ma'am." Mirabelle said, her professionalism unwavering. "The 2022 from Sancerre is particularly crisp this season." She pronounced it correctly, softly, without a hint of correction in her tone, Sauvignon Blanc. It was a tiny thing, a breath of air. But to Tiffany, it was a challenge. Her head snapped up, her blue eyes narrowing. It was the first time she had made direct eye contact with Mirabelle all evening. A slow, mocking smile spread across her glossed lips. "Oh, listen to that," Tiffany said, looking at her friends, her voice dripping with condescension. "Where did they find you, sweetheart?" "Fresh off the boat from—" "Where is it?" "Boratistan." Her friends giggled. Richard finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. He saw Mirabelle standing ramrod straight, her face a pale, impassive mask. He saw Tiffany preening from her cheap shot. He should have said something. A simple "Tiffany, don't be rude" would have sufficed. But he hated confrontation, especially public confrontation. He just offered a weak, apologetic grimace in Mirabelle's direction and looked back down at his screen, effectively siding with his girlfriend through his silence. The silence was his sin, and it was a sin Mirabelle would not forget. Tiffany, emboldened, leaned forward. "Say it again for me." She cooed, her voice a weapon. "Say Sauvignon Blanc." She mimicked a thick, cartoonish Eastern European accent, turning the elegant French words into a clumsy, ugly sound. Sauvignon Blanc. The two friends howled with laughter, this time loud enough to turn heads at the neighboring tables. The meticulously crafted hum of Ethelgard had been broken. For a moment, Mirabelle felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the familiar, sickening shame of being singled out for being different. She could feel the stares of the other diners. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But then something else took over. A cold, hard resolve that had been forged in the fires of her family's struggles. She thought of her father's frail hands, her mother's chapped knuckles, her own sleepless nights filled with code. These people with their casual cruelty and unearned fortunes knew nothing of strength. She met Tiffany's mocking gaze directly. Her own eyes, a deep, intelligent grey, were steady. She did not raise her voice. She did not tremble. "It is pronounced Sauvignon Blanc," she said, her Polish accent suddenly sounding not like a flaw, but like a statement. It was clear, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" The confidence, the sheer refusal to be cowed, stunned Tiffany into silence. The laughter from her friends died in their throats. They had expected tears or a flustered retreat. They didn't know what to do with this quiet, unshakable dignity. Tiffany scoffed, trying to regain control. "Whatever. Just bring the wine." Mirabelle gave a single, sharp nod. Of course. She turned and walked away, her back perfectly straight. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. She moved with the same measured grace as before, but now it felt different. It was the grace of a queen retreating from a peasant's squabble. As she entered the controlled chaos of the kitchen, she allowed herself one deep, shuddering breath. The chef, a burly man named Antoine, who missed nothing, gave her a sympathetic look. "Let me guess. Table 7. Mirabelle just nodded, retrieving a wine bucket. "Don't let them get to you, ma chérie," he said gruffly. "Their money can't buy class." Mirabelle managed a small, tight smile. "I know." But as she chilled the bottle and polished the glasses, the scene replayed in her mind. It wasn't just Tiffany's overt cruelty that stung. It was Richard Davenport's silence, his tacit approval. He, a titan of industry, a man lauded for his brilliant mind, had sat there and let it happen. He had looked at her, seen her humiliation, and chosen to do nothing. She finished her shift in a haze of cold fury. The hours crawled by. When she finally clocked out at 1:30 a.m., she didn't take the subway. She walked the 50 blocks back to Queens, the cold night air doing little to cool the fire in her chest. Each step was a promise to herself. One day, they would not see a waitress. They would not hear an accent. They would only see her power. She let herself into the quiet apartment. Her mother was asleep in a chair by her father's bed. Mirabelle gently placed a blanket over her. She looked at her father, his face peaceful in sleep, and felt a surge of fierce, protective love. This was why she endured it. For them. But it was also for herself. She sat down at her desk, the city lights twinkling outside her window. She opened her laptop. The screen illuminated her face, her expression now hard and determined. On the screen was a complex web of code, a revolutionary logistics algorithm she had named Nightingale. It was designed to optimize supply chains by prioritizing ethical sourcing and environmental sustainability without sacrificing efficiency. It was brilliant, it was groundbreaking, and it was almost finished. For months, she had been sending out her business proposal to venture capital firms, getting nothing but automated rejections. They saw a student from Queens with no track record and didn't bother to read past the first page. But 2 weeks ago, one had responded. A boutique firm called Horizon Ventures, run by a legendary, notoriously tough investor named Catherine Albright. They had asked for more data. Then a technical demonstration. Then a meeting. The meeting was tomorrow. Wednesday. At 10 a.m. She checked the location on the calendar invitation one last time, a bitter smile touching her lips. Location Davenport Innovations. 45th floor boardroom. She closed her eyes. She could still hear Tiffany's mocking voice. Sauvignon Blanc. She could still see Richard Davenport's averted gaze. Tomorrow he would look at her. Tomorrow he would have no choice. Richard Davenport lived in a penthouse that felt less like a home and more like a modern art museum. It was a cavern of glass chrome and white marble overlooking Central Park, a sterile testament to his success. And tonight, it felt like a prison. After leaving Ethelgard, the mood in the car had been tense. Tiffany, sensing his disapproval, had launched into a defensive tirade. "Oh, don't give me that look, Richie," she'd said, reapplying her lipstick in the vanity mirror. "It was a joke. She needs to lighten up. It's not my fault she can't speak English properly. Her English is perfect, Tiff." "She has an accent," Richard had replied, his voice flat. He kept his eyes on the blur of city lights, the image of the waitress's dignified, hurt face seared into his mind. Accent can't speak English, same thing. She's a waitress. Her job is to be agreeable. If she's so sensitive, maybe she should get a different job. He didn't argue further. He knew it was pointless. Arguing with Tiffany was like punching water. It was exhausting, and you never made an impact. He'd met her at a charity gala 6 months ago. She was beautiful, vivacious, and utterly uncomplicated. She was a distraction, an easy and attractive accessory to his demanding life. He hadn't been looking for a partner. He'd been looking for a reprieve. Now he was beginning to realize that her lack of complication was a symptom of a profound lack of depth, a hollowness that her beauty could no longer conceal. His silence at the restaurant gnawed at him. He told himself he'd avoided a scene, that it was the pragmatic choice. But he knew better. It was cowardice. He who could face down hostile boards and ruthless competitors had flinched from correcting his girlfriend's playground cruelty. He had failed a basic test of character, and the knowledge left a sour taste in his mouth. He went to bed long after Tiffany had fallen asleep, but sleep wouldn't come. He kept thinking about the look in the waitress's eyes. It wasn't just hurt. It was recognition, as if she had seen him exactly for what he was, in that moment, weak. He finally drifted off into a restless sleep, his last thought being a vague hope that he would never see her again, if only to escape the reminder of his own failure. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Queens, Mirabelle Kowalski was preparing for war. She slept for exactly 2 hours, a disciplined, necessary shutdown of her mind and body. She woke at 4 a.m., the city still cloaked in darkness. The first thing she did was check on her parents. Her mother was now asleep in her own bed. Mirabelle adjusted her father's pillows and checked his vitals monitor, the soft, steady beep, a familiar comfort. She whispered, "Dzień dobry, tato." "Good morning, Dad," a ritual she never missed. Then she began her transformation. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the grime of the restaurant and the lingering humiliation of the night. She chose her outfit with the precision of a general selecting his uniform. It wasn't expensive, a simple charcoal grey pantsuit she'd bought at a consignment shop and had tailored to fit her perfectly. Underneath a crisp white silk blouse, her mother had given her one of the few nice things they'd managed to keep from their old life. She pulled her dark hair not into a waitress's bun, but into a low, elegant chignon. Her makeup was minimal, designed to enhance, not conceal. A touch of concealer for the dark circles under her eyes, a sweep of mascara to define her sharp gaze, and a neutral shade on her lips. When she looked in the mirror, the person staring back was not Mirabelle the waitress. It was Maya Kowalska, founder and CEO of Nightingale. The accent was still part of her, but today it would be a mark of her unique perspective, not a target for mockery. She spent the next few hours running through her presentation one last time, her laptop open on the small kitchen table. The algorithm was her masterpiece. Nightingale didn't just find the cheapest or fastest route for a supply chain. It cross-referenced data from dozens of sources, NGO reports on labor practices, satellite imagery, tracking deforestation, real-time carbon emissions data, and used machine learning to create logistical pathways that were not only efficient, but certifiably ethical and sustainable. For a major corporation, it was a PR dream, a shield against scandal, and as her financial models showed a source of long-term profitability in a world increasingly conscious of corporate responsibility. At 8:30 a.m., she kissed her sleeping mother's forehead and slipped out of the apartment. She took the subway, her briefcase clutched in her hand. She stood amongst the throng of mourning commuters, invisible, just another face in the crowd. But inside, she was a supernova ready to explode. Catherine Albright was already in the Davenport Innovations lobby when Mirabelle arrived at 9:45 a.m. Catherine was in her late 50s with a severe silver bob and eyes that could dissect a balance sheet from 50 paces. She was wearing a blood-red Armani suit, a splash of predatory color in the building's monochromatic lobby. She was a legend in the VC world, known for her brutal honesty and her uncanny ability to spot talent where no one else was looking. "Maya," she said, her voice crisp. She never used the anglicized Mirabelle. "You're punctual. I like that. It suggests you respect other people's time." "Good morning, Miss Albright," Mirabelle said, her voice steady. "Nervous." Focused, Mirabelle corrected gently. Catherine's thin lips curved into a rare smile. "Good. Remember what I told you. You don't need them. They need you." Davenport's company has taken a beating in the press over the last year for their suppliers in Southeast Asia. Child labor allegations. Environmental corners cut. Their stock is solid, but their brand is vulnerable. Nightingale isn't just a piece of software for them. It's absolution. You are not asking for a handout. You are selling the cure. Mirabelle nodded, the words reinforcing her own resolve. "They don't know who you are," Catherine continued as they walked toward the exclusive elevators for the upper floors. "My office just referred to you as the project lead. They think they're meeting some seasoned veteran I poached from a rival. Let them think that. Walk in there, own the room, and don't give them an inch. Understood?" "Understood, Ms. Albright." The elevator ride to the 45th floor was silent. Mirabelle could feel the pressure change in her ears. She was ascending quite literally into a different world. The doors opened onto a reception area that was more gallery than office. A massive abstract sculpture dominated the center, and the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a godlike view of Manhattan. A sleek receptionist led them to the boardroom. "Mr. Davenport will be with you in a moment. He's just finishing a call." The boardroom was an intimidating space. A vast, dark wood table sat polished to a mirror shine, surrounded by 20 leather chairs. One entire wall was a screen. The view from the windows was breathtaking, designed to remind any visitor of the sheer scale of the power wielded within these walls. Catherine and Mirabelle took their seats, setting up their laptops. They were a team of two, facing what would likely be a full retinue of Davenport's top brass. A few minutes later, 3 men in expensive suits entered. They introduced themselves as the COO, CFO, and Chief Legal Officer. They were polite but dismissive, their eyes constantly flicking towards the door, waiting for their boss. Then the door opened, and Richard Davenport walked in. He looked tired. He was loosening his tie, speaking to his assistant as he entered. "Just push the Tokyo call to 5, and get me coffee, a large black coffee." He turned to the table, a professional, welcoming smile already forming on his face. "Catherine, it's great to see you. I've heard incredible things from my team about this Project Nightingale." We're very excited to finally meet the genius behind it." His eyes scanned the table. He nodded at Catherine, and then his gaze moved to the poised professional woman sitting beside her. And his world stopped. Time seemed to slow down. His professional smile froze, then melted away, replaced by a look of utter slack-jawed disbelief. The blood drained from his face. It was her. The waitress. The woman with the Polish accent. The woman his girlfriend had humiliated last night. The woman whose humiliation he had silently condoned. She was here, in his boardroom, wearing a suit that looked more commanding on her than his own did on him. Her hair was different. Her expression was different, but there was no mistake. It was her. The same steady, intelligent grey eyes that had met Tiffany's mockery with unshakable dignity were now looking at him across his own boardroom table. Mirabelle held his gaze. She did not smile. She did not smirk. Her expression was perfectly, terrifyingly neutral. She offered no flicker of recognition, no sign that she had ever seen him before in her life. It was a power move of such exquisite subtlety that it knocked the air from his lungs. Catherine Albright, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding, seized the moment. "Richard, gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the thick tension only Richard could feel. "Allow me to introduce the founder and architect of the Nightingale platform, Miss Maya Kowalski." Richard's COO, a man named Bob, stood up to shake her hand. "Ms. Kowalski, a pleasure." Mirabelle stood and shook his hand firmly. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Peterson." Richard remained frozen in place, his mind a frantic, screaming mess. Waitress, accent, Tiffany. Oh God, he felt a wave of nausea. This couldn't be happening. It was some bizarre, stress-induced hallucination. But it was very, very real. Catherine was looking at him, an eyebrow slightly raised at his stunned silence. He had to say something. He had to function. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Ms. Kowalski," he managed to say. His voice strained. "Welcome to Davenport Innovations." Mirabelle finally turned her full attention to him. She gave him a small, polite, and utterly impersonal nod. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice calm and clear. Her Polish accent was still there, the same accent from last night. But in this context, in this room, coming from this woman in a power suit who was being presented as a genius, it sounded different. It sounded authoritative, exotic, powerful. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us," she said. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. She was acting as if they were complete strangers. The cold, professional courtesy was 1,000 times more damning than any accusation would have been. She was showing him in no uncertain terms just how insignificant their previous encounter was to her. She had already moved on. She was here to do business, and he was just another client. He sank into his chair at the head of the table, his mind reeling. His carefully ordered world had just been turned upside down, and the person who had done it was now coolly opening her laptop, ready to decide his company's future. The presentation began, but for Richard, the first 10 minutes were a silent movie played against the screaming soundtrack of his own shame. His mind was a feedback loop of panic. The waitress, the accent, Tiffany's mocking voice. My silence. He stared at Mirabelle, but he wasn't seeing a poised executive. He was seeing the ghost of his own cowardice from the night before. His team, however, was captivated. They knew nothing of the drama. They simply saw Maya Kowalski take command of the room. She spoke with an unhurried, deliberate confidence. She didn't try to mask her Polish accent. She owned it. In the sterile, powerful context of the boardroom, it sounded not like a flaw, but like a mark of distinction. She began not with financials, but with a foundational truth. Every product on every shelf has a hidden history. She said, her voice resonating with a quiet passion as an image of a deforested landscape filled the screen behind her. A history of materials, sourced hands that touched it, and fuel that was burned to bring it to us. For decades, that history has been a black box deliberately obscured for the sake of profit. We are told that ethics are expensive and sustainability is inefficient. This is the foundational lie of modern logistics. She clicked to the next slide, a complex, elegant web of data points blooming on the screen. Nightingale changes that paradigm. My algorithm doesn't just track products, it tracks provenance. It doesn't just optimize for speed, it optimizes for integrity. Using a proprietary blend of blockchain verification, real-time satellite monitoring, and cross-referenced NGO data. Nightingale provides a single immutable score for any given supply route. We call it the Integrity Index. Richard's COO, Bob Peterson, leaned forward, his initial air of dismissal evaporating. Are you saying you can actually quantify corporate responsibility in real time? I'm saying I can give you a dashboard that will tell you with 99.8% accuracy if a subcontractor 3 levels down your supply chain is using child labor before it becomes a headline in the New York Times. Mirabelle stated, her gaze sweeping across the executives. The platform will then automatically suggest alternative pathways that maintain your integrity index above a preset threshold, while minimizing the impact on delivery time and cost. The CFO, a hawk-eyed man named Gerald, jumped in his tone, skeptical. That sounds impossibly ambitious. And expensive. What's the cost of integration? Mirabelle turned to him, a flicker of a smile on her lips. This was a question she was born to answer. The cost of integration is approximately 1/5 the average cost of a brand reputation crisis. However, our models project a 15% increase in long-term profitability for early adopters through 3 main avenues. She held up her fingers. 1. Premiumization. The ability to market your products as Nightingale certified allows for a higher price point. 2. Risk mitigation. You will virtually eliminate the risk of costly scandals and boycotts. And 3. Investor confidence. In a market pivoting hard towards ESG metrics, having the highest integrity index in your industry makes you a magnet for capital. It was at that moment Richard finally snapped out of his personal hell. He was a businessman above all else, and what he was hearing was not just brilliant, it was revolutionary. He had spent the last year in damage control over a supplier scandal. This woman, Ms. Kowalski, wasn't just offering a solution, she was offering a fortress. He looked at the flawless logic of her financial models, the sheer genius of her technical architecture. The woman he had dismissed as a simple waitress was a visionary. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. His judgment had been so catastrophically, insultingly wrong. He had looked at her and seen a uniform and an accent. He had been as blind and as shallow as Tiffany. The final part of the presentation was a live demonstration. Mirabelle pulled up a hypothetical company and with a few clicks ran the Nightingale analysis. Red flags popped up across the map. Labor abuses, environmental violations. Then she clicked one more button. The algorithm whirred and in a stunning visual display, the logistical map reconfigured itself. Red lines turned green as new ethical suppliers and cleaner shipping routes were phased in. A new streamlined and profoundly ethical supply chain emerged. A stunned silence fell over the boardroom. Bob Peterson let out a low whistle. "My God," he whispered. "This is the Holy Grail." Catherine Albright, who had been watching with immense satisfaction, sat back in her chair. "Richard, gentlemen," she said, smoothly, seizing the moment. "We are presenting you with an opportunity. Maya is the sole owner of the Nightingale IP. Horizon Ventures is providing the seed capital. We are offering Davenport Innovations the chance to be our foundational client and a minority stakeholder. We believe a 10% equity stake in Nightingale in exchange for a $30 million capital injection would be a suitable arrangement." The room buzzed. 30 million was significant, but for 10% of something this groundbreaking, it was a steal. Richard knew it. Catherine had deliberately underpriced it to spark a fire. "We would obviously need to perform our due diligence," Richard said, the words automatic, the standard corporate dance. "Of course," Mirabelle said coolly, a masterful touch of nonchalance in her voice. "All our data is available for your team to review. We are, however, speaking with 2 other firms in the tech logistics space next week. One of them is in Seattle." The unspoken name hung in the air. Amazon. It was a perfect bluff, whether it was true or not. She was creating urgency. She was in complete control. The meeting concluded with promises of swift follow-ups. Richard's team was electrified, already talking about synergy and market disruption. He insisted on walking Catherine and Mirabelle to the elevators personally. The chatter of his executives faded down the hall, leaving the 3 of them in the grand, silent reception area. "Catherine Ms. Kowalski." "Thank you for coming in," Richard said formally. "The pleasure was ours." "Richard," Catherine replied, giving him a sharp look. "We'll await your term sheet." She stepped into the arriving elevator. "Maya, I'll meet you downstairs." The doors began to close, leaving Richard and Mirabelle alone for a few excruciating seconds. The professional facade between them felt paper-thin. This was his chance. He had to say something. "Listen, Ms. Kowalski." "Mirabelle." He started, his voice low and desperate. "About last night, at the restaurant. Mirabelle looked at him, her face a mask of impenetrable calm. Another elevator pinged open for her. She turned to face him fully, her quiet voice cutting through his fumbling words. "Miss Davenport," she said, the tone formal, but the message deeply personal. "Last night I was your waitress. Today I am a potential business partner. I expect to be treated with the appropriate professional courtesy in both situations. You failed in the first. I trust you will not fail in the second." She didn't wait for a reply. She stepped into her elevator, her back straight, her head held high. Just before the doors slid shut, she delivered her final devastating assessment, her voice soft, but the words landing like daggers. "What your girlfriend said, what you allowed her to say. It was ugly, and it was ignorant, but it has no bearing on this deal. My work speaks for itself." She paused, her cool grey eyes locking onto his. "The question you need to ask yourself, Mr. Davenport, is whether your character does." The doors closed, leaving him standing alone in the echoing silence of his marble palace, the reflection of his own shocked face staring back at him from the polished steel. He had never felt so small in his entire life, The moment the elevator doors closed, Mirabelle leaned against the cool metal wall and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 24 hours. The adrenaline that had fueled her began to recede, leaving a profound, bone-deep weariness in its wake. She had done it. She had faced the dragon in his own lair and walked away unscorched. Catherine Albright was waiting for her in the lobby, a rare, genuine smile gracing her features. She held out a hand. "You, Maya Kowalski, were magnificent." Mirabelle shook it, a real smile finally breaking through her own composure. He was shocked. "Shocked is an understatement," Catherine said, her sharp eyes glinting with amusement. "I haven't seen a man that powerful look, that utterly neutered, since I foreclosed on a Swiss bank. There's a story there, isn't there?" Mirabelle considered for a moment, the memory of Tiffany's sneer flashing in her mind. "Let's just say, Mr. Davenport was given a practical lesson in not judging a book by its cover." Catherine nodded, sensing there was more, but having the grace not to press. "Well, the hook is set. Deep. They'll send a term sheet by the end of the day. They can't afford not to. Now comes the hard part, negotiation. Go home. Get some sleep. My team will handle the initial volley. We celebrate tonight." Mirabelle felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you, Catherine, for believing in me." "Don't thank me," Catherine replied, her expression turning serious. "I believe in profit. Your genius is going to make us both very, very rich. Now go. You've earned a moment of peace." The subway ride back to Queens was surreal. The world outside the train window was unchanged, but Mirabelle's world had been irrevocably altered. She wasn't just a waitress and a student anymore. She was a founder, an innovator, a woman who had made a billionaire squirm. Her final words to him had been unplanned, a raw and honest response to his fumbling apology. She had spoken her truth, and it had felt more powerful than any business pitch. Up on the 45th floor, Richard Davenport was not at peace. He had walked back into the boardroom in a daze, where his team was buzzing with the predatory excitement of sharks that smell blood. "The valuation Albright proposed is frankly an insult," Gerald, the CFO, was saying gleefully. "To them, I mean. We should move to acquire the entire company, offer $50 million for 80%. Lock it down before anyone else gets a sniff." Richard stared at them, their words barely registering. He was a million miles away, his mind caught on a single damning sentence. "The question you need to ask yourself, Mr. Davenport, is whether your character does." "Shut up," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The excited chatter died instantly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him, baffled. "Sir," his COO asked. "Everyone just be quiet for a minute," Richard said, rubbing his temples. He walked to the vast window and stared out at the city. But he wasn't seeing the view. He was seeing a highlight reel of his own moral compromises. His relationship with Tiffany was the most glaring. He had tolerated her shallowness, excused her casual cruelty, enabled her entitlement, all because it was easy. And last night, that ease had come at the expense of another person's dignity. A person who, it turned out, possessed more intelligence, resilience, and character than Tiffany had in her entire curated existence. Mirabelle's final words hadn't just been an indictment. They had been a mirror. And he was disgusted by the reflection. He turned back to the room, a new, unfamiliar resolve etched on his face. "Gerald," he commanded, "draw up a new term sheet. 40 million for a 20% stake." Gerald's jaw dropped. 40 for 20. "Sir, that's double the valuation she offered. We have all the leverage here. We have no leverage when we're dealing with someone we should be profoundly grateful to." Richard snapped back. "And add a $5 million grant, no strings attached, for the Nightingale Foundation." "The what?" Bob, the COO, asked. "She didn't mention a foundation. She will," Richard said with absolute certainty. "A woman like that doesn't build something this revolutionary just for the money. The grant is non-negotiable. It's a sign of good faith. I want to partner with her, not fleece her. Bob, get our best tech team on her code. I want them to be thorough, but I also want them to be deferential. Treat her intellectual property like the crown jewels. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," they chorused, stunned by the seismic shift in their boss's demeanor. "Now get out," he said, his tone softening. "I have a personal matter to attend to." Alone in the sterile quiet of his office, Richard sat behind his massive desk, a symbol of a power that now felt hollow. He knew what he had to do. It was a long overdue amputation. He picked up his phone and called Tiffany. She answered with a bubbly, self-absorbed lilt. "Richie, I was just about to text you. I saw the most divine little Birkin and Tiffany." "We need to talk," he cut in his voice, flat and cold. Her tone shifted instantly. "What's wrong?" "You sound weird." "I'm ending it," he said, tearing the bandage off in one clean motion. "I'm ending things between us." There was a beat of stunned silence, then a sharp, incredulous laugh. "What is this about last night? Don't be so dramatic. It was just some stupid waitress." "No," Richard said, his voice hardening. "She wasn't just some stupid waitress. Her name is Maya Kowalski, and she is the founder of a tech company that I am about to invest $40 million into. She was in my boardroom this morning." The silence on the other end was absolute heavy, with the sound of a world view collapsing. That's impossible," she finally stammered. "She's a liar, a con artist. She's trying to trick you, Richie. The only person who has been dishonest is me." "Richard," confessed the words tasting like ash. "By pretending that this relationship was something it wasn't. By pretending I didn't see your cruelty. Last night wasn't an isolated incident, Tiff. It was just the first time I was forced to really look at it, and it made me look at myself. I don't like the person I am with you." "The person you are with me," she shrieked, her voice pitching high with panic and fury. "I made you relevant. Before me, you were just some boring tech nerd. I got you on magazine covers. You got me into parties," he corrected calmly. "She is getting my company into the future. There's a difference. So that's it. You're dumping me for some immigrant waitress with a funny accent." The words were meant as a final venomous insult, but they landed with pathetic desperation. "I'm dumping you because you mocked that woman's accent," Richard said, his voice laced with ice. "And because I sat there and let you. It's over, Tiffany. My assistant will arrange to have your things sent over. Have a good life." He hung up before she could unleash the scream he knew was coming. He then pulled out a sheet of his personal stationery. An email wouldn't suffice. This required more. He began to write not as a CEO to a potential partner, but as a man offering an unvarnished apology to a woman he had wronged. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just hoped to prove that her words had in fact meant something. Humiliated and enraged, Tiffany Hayes did what she did best. She weaponized her platform. That evening, she went live on Instagram to her 2.3 million followers. With expertly produced tears streaming down her face, she spun a lurid tale of betrayal. She painted herself as the devoted girlfriend, blindsided by a ruthless social climbing predator. This woman, she pretended to be a poor, innocent waitress. Tiffany sobbed into her phone's camera. She stalked Richie, found out about his business, and cooked up this elaborate scheme to trick him. She's using her sob story to steal my life. She never used Mirabelle's name, but her description was viciously precise. This Polish girl with the thick accent. The internet exploded. The comments section became a cesspool of speculation and vitriol. Within an hour, #WaitressGate was trending. At that exact moment, Mirabelle was having a quiet, celebratory dinner with her mother and Catherine at a small, unassuming Polish restaurant in Greenpoint, a place that smelled of home. She felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time, the future felt bright. Then her phone began to buzz, and then Catherine's, and then her mother's with a text from a worried cousin. "Don't look at it," Catherine commanded, her face instantly grim as she scanned a headline on her own screen. "It's a classic smear campaign. She's trying to discredit you before the deal is even announced." But it was too late. Mirabelle had already seen it. Billionaire Davenport dumps. Influencer for mystery waitress. Is Davenport Innovations being conned by an immigrant scammer? The joy from her triumph vanished, replaced by a cold dread. Her story was being twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. "What do we do?" Mirabelle asked, her voice trembling for the first time that day. Catherine's eyes were cold as steel. "We do nothing. We remain silent and professional." She took a sip of her wine, her gaze distant. "Tiffany has just handed Mr. Davenport a shovel. Let's see if he uses it to dig his own grave or to build a bridge." The digital firestorm Tiffany ignited was more intense than she could have imagined. By morning, #WaitressGate was the #1 trending topic. Tiffany's tear-streaked, victimized narrative had gone viral, painting Mirabelle as a predatory immigrant social climber. The story was seductive, and the internet devoured it. News outlets, smelling blood, began plastering Mirabelle's student photo next to paparazzi, shots of Tiffany turning her life into a cheap, ugly soap opera. For Mirabelle, the joy of her victory curdled into a familiar, sickening dread. Her phone buzzed with hateful messages. She had fought her way out of the box society had put her in, only to have a new one plastered with lies built around her. In the 45th floor war room of Davenport Innovations, Richard's PR team was in full panic mode. The company's stock was taking a hit, and the board was demanding action. "You have to cut her loose," urged Lena, his head of crisis management. "Issue a statement. Frame it as being misled. Distance yourself from her completely. It's the only way to save your reputation." The room looked at Richard, expecting him to take the pragmatic route. But Richard was thinking of Mirabelle's unshakable dignity, of the casual cruelty she had endured, and of his own shameful silence. He had failed her in private. He would not fail her in public. "No," he said, his voice quiet, but laced with cold iron. "I'm not cutting her loose. I'm doing the opposite." He stood, his decision made. "Lena, clear the main atrium. I want a press conference at 2 p.m. Invite everyone. The Wall Street Journal. The gossip blogs, all of them. I want everyone who is writing this story to be in that room." He spent the next few hours not with spin doctors, but with his lawyers. He wasn't crafting an excuse. He was accelerating a deal. The due diligence on Nightingale was complete, and it was in the words of his head engineer, flawless. He instructed his team to finalize the contracts on the terms he'd offered. He was going to turn a PR crisis into a landmark business announcement. He made one final call to Catherine Albright, outlining his plan and making a single non-negotiable request. At 2 p.m., the atrium was a media circus, a frenzy of camera flashes and shouting reporters anticipating a juicy scandal. Richard Davenport walked onto the stage alone, a figure of calm resolve amidst the chaos. The room fell silent as he stepped to the podium. "Good afternoon," he began. "I'm here to set the record straight. The narrative being promoted by my former girlfriend, Ms. Tiffany Hayes, is a malicious fiction. Our relationship is over, and her portrayal of events is false." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was not the denial they expected. The truth, he continued, his voice ringing with conviction, is that Ms. Maya Kowalski is a visionary. She is the creator of a platform so revolutionary it will fundamentally change global commerce. She built this while working full-time to support her family and pursuing a double major at university. She did not need to chase my investment. Her genius brought her here on its own merit. He leaned into the microphone, ready to drop his bombshell. "Therefore, I am thrilled to officially announce that Davenport Innovations has acquired a 20% stake in her company Nightingale for the sum of $40 million. The room erupted. The sound of 100 camera shutters clicking at once was like a burst of machine gun fire. This wasn't a scandal. It was an acquisition. A massive one. Richard held up a hand, silencing the chaos. "Furthermore, we will be endowing the new Nightingale Foundation, chaired by Ms. Kowalski, with a $5 million grant to promote ethical practices in technology. We are not being conned. We are honored to be her partners." He then let his corporate mask fall, his expression turning somber. "Finally, regarding the incident at the restaurant, what happened is that my former girlfriend mocked Ms. Kowalski's accent in an act of ugly, classless bigotry. My greatest regret and my personal shame is that in that moment I was silent. For that, I have apologized to Ms. Kowalski privately, and I apologize to her now publicly. Her dignity was absolute. My failure to defend it was a disgrace." The raw honesty of his confession stunned the press into silence. He had taken all the lies and innuendo and incinerated them with the undeniable truth. "Maya Kowalski represents the very best of what this country is supposed to be," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "That it doesn't matter where you come from or what accent you have. All that matters is the strength of your character and the power of your ideas." He gestured to the side of the stage. "And now I'd like to introduce you to her." Out walked Catherine Albright, a triumphant glint in her eye, and beside her, walking into the blinding storm of flashes, was Mirabelle. She wore her simple charcoal grey suit like armor, her face a mask of poise and strength. She was not the victim of this story. She was its hero. Richard stepped back from the podium, ceding the stage. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. He gave her a small, respectful nod. She returned it. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was acknowledgement. It was a bridge. Mirabelle stepped up to the microphone. The room was utterly silent, leaning in to hear the voice that had launched 1,000 headlines. She took a deep breath. "Dziękuję, Richard," she said, her Polish thank you clear and proud. She looked out over the sea of faces, her grey eyes steady. "My name is Maya Kowalski. I am the founder of Nightingale." She paused, letting her presence fill the room, before delivering her final, definitive statement. "My work speaks for itself. Are there any questions?" Her voice, carrying the very accent Tiffany Hayes had tried to weaponize against her, echoed through the atrium. It was not the sound of a foreigner, or a waitress, or a victim. It was the sound of the future. It was the sound of power. The press conference was a masterstroke. It didn't just end the scandal. It transformed it. Davenport Innovations stock, which had dipped in the morning, skyrocketed, closing the day up 12%. The narrative flipped completely. Mirabelle was no longer the scheming waitress. She was hailed as the Nightingale of Silicon Alley, a tech prodigy and an embodiment of the American dream. Tiffany Hayes, on the other hand, became a pariah. Her brand, built on aspirational luxury, was now tainted with ugly bigotry. She lost sponsors, followers, and her perch in the social stratosphere overnight. Her attempt to ruin Mirabelle had only destroyed herself. In the months that followed, Mirabelle's life changed in every conceivable way. She moved her parents into a comfortable new home with a full-time nurse for her father. Her mother, free from financial worry, began auditing literature courses at Columbia. Her passion for books rekindled. Mirabelle, meanwhile, became the force she was always meant to be. As CEO of Nightingale, she was relentless, brilliant, and fair. She hired a diverse team of the best and brightest, creating a company culture that valued integrity as much as innovation. Her relationship with Richard Davenport evolved into a complex and deeply respectful professional partnership. The apology he had written and the public stand he had taken had laid a new foundation. They worked closely, their weekly strategy meetings, a masterclass in intellectual synergy. The hint of a deeper connection lingered beneath the surface, but both knew that the trust between them had to be earned in boardrooms and business deals long before it could ever be explored elsewhere. The real story was not a romance. It was one of mutual, hard-won respect. Mirabelle's triumph wasn't getting the billionaire. It was becoming his peer. Her value was never in question. It just took a while for the world and for Richard Davenport to see the valuation report. If Mirabelle's story of triumph over prejudice resonated with you, if you believe in the power of dignity and the hidden genius within us, all please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let us know in the comments below if you've ever had a moment where you proved someone's first impression of you wrong. These stories matter, and to make sure you don't miss our next story about the underdog turning the tables, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell, because we believe that character, not circumstance, is what truly defines us. Thank you for listening.